The school dormitory, once a sanctuary for students, harbors dark secrets and chilling tales. Shadows lurk in corners, and the feeling of being watched never fades. As night falls, the true horrors emerge, revealing that not all who reside here are living. Welcome to the horror at school dormitories, where your worst fears come true. The dorm I once lived in back in college was a typical student residence, with rows of rooms lining each floor and a long, gloomy corridor connecting them. The building was usually bustling with activity, filled with students studying, chatting, or moving about their daily routines. However, there was one room that remained conspicuously unoccupied for nearly 2 years before I moved in. This room, shrouded in mystery and dark tales, was avoided by everyone because of the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. Rumor had it that the room's previous occupant had taken her own life in a moment of despair. Ever since her death, strange and unsettling events had begun to plague the dormitory. Footsteps could be heard echoing through the corridor during the dead of night, footsteps that seemed to come from nowhere and lead to nowhere. Whispers and eerie noises would punctuate the silence, sending shivers down the spines of those who dared to listen too closely. One night, while I was burning the midnight oil studying for my exams, I experienced the haunting firsthand. As I was poring over my notes, a soft knock echoed from my door. Startled, I got up and opened it, only to find an empty corridor staring back at me. Perplexed, I returned to my desk, only for the knocking to start again a few minutes later. This time, I hesitated before opening the door, but once again, there was no one there. The third knock came almost immediately, this time more insistent, almost a pounding. I opened the door quickly, half expecting to catch someone playing a prank, but the corridor was deserted. A chilling realization washed over me. I was alone in the building. Everyone else had gone to a party off campus, leaving me to study in solitude. Fear gripped me, and I quickly shut the door, retreating to my bed and pulling the covers over my head. I lay there, heart pounding, straining to hear any further noises. That night marked the beginning of my habit of sleeping with the lights on, a small comfort against the darkness that seemed to harbor malevolent spirits. These occurrences, I learned, were not uncommon. The other students had their own stories of strange noises and ghostly apparitions. Yet, it was the boarder who had the misfortune of occupying the haunted room who suffered the most. She would often hear the ghostly presence of the dead girl late at night, reciting the rosary over and over. The prayers would start softly, a faint whisper in the stillness of the night, but would gradually grow louder until they filled the room with their eerie cadence. Sometimes, the praying was so clear that the boarder could make out every word, each bead of the rosary sliding through spectral fingers. She dreaded opening her eyes during these moments, for fear of seeing the girl kneeling beside her bed, eyes closed in prayer, a mournful expression on her ghostly face. The terror of these nightly visitations took a toll on the poor boarder, who soon became a shadow of her former self, constantly sleep-deprived and haunted by the relentless presence. Despite the fear and the pervasive sense of dread, life in the dormitory continued. Students learned to live with the haunting, accepting it as a macabre part of their college experience. The room remained unoccupied for the rest of my time there, a reminder of the tragedy and the unexplained phenomena that had come to define the dormitory's dark reputation. During my college years, I stayed in a girls' dormitory that was always bustling with activity. Our room was modest, furnished with a double-deck bed. My roommate Riley occupied the lower bunk, while I slept on the top. I had this peculiar habit of sleeping with my arm hanging over the side of the bed, much to Riley's irritation. She would often grab my arm and pull it, waking me up in a state of irritation. One night, Riley went to bed earlier than usual. I stayed up late, diligently reviewing for an important exam. Midnight came and went, and the dormitory was enveloped in a deep, hushed silence. Exhaustion finally crept in, and I decided to call it a night. As usual, my arm dangled over the edge of the bed as I drifted off to sleep. Just as I was about to fall into slumber, I felt a cold, damp hand clasping my arm. Without opening my eyes, I muttered, "Riley, what are you doing? Stop pestering me." But the hand did not let go. Annoyed, I yelled at her again, expecting her to release her grip. Instead, the hand tightened its hold. Curiosity and frustration got the better of me, and I opened my eyes. To my horror, I saw a pale girl with long, disheveled hair standing beside my bed. What struck terror into my heart was that she had no face. Her features were a blank slate, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. I was paralyzed with fear, my mind struggling to comprehend the sight before me. Panicked, I squeezed my eyes shut and began to pray, hoping the apparition would disappear. But the faceless girl held onto my arm, her grip cold and unyielding. She started to pull me down, her strength far greater than it should have been. I struggled, fighting against the unseen force. After what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to free my arm. In a state of sheer terror, I jumped out of bed and called out to Riley. She remained in a deep, undisturbed sleep, oblivious to the commotion. Desperate for safety, I turned on the lights, casting away the shadows that seemed to harbor the girl's presence. I scoured the room, searching for any sign of an intruder, but found nothing. Fearing the girl's return, I stayed up all night, my heart pounding with every creak and whisper of the old dormitory. The next morning, I recounted the harrowing experience to Riley. Her face turned pale as she listened, and soon the news spread throughout the dormitory. Our landlady, a woman who had seen and heard many strange things over the years, approached me with a grave expression. She revealed that just the previous week, one of her boarders in the dormitory behind ours had seen the same faceless girl. The description matched perfectly: pale skin, long hair, and the eerie absence of facial features. This confirmation sent chills down my spine. It wasn't just a figment of my imagination or a nightmare. Others had seen her too. Life in the dormitory was never the same after that night. The once familiar and safe environment now felt sinister and threatening. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside, filled me with dread. The faceless girl haunted my thoughts, and I found it difficult to sleep, always fearing her return. Riley and I developed a routine to ensure we were never alone at night. We studied together, went to bed at the same time, and always kept a light on. The other girls in the dormitory also took precautions, whispering prayers and hanging charms to ward off evil spirits. The faceless girl became a ghost story passed down among the students, a chilling reminder of the unknown entities that might share our living spaces. Despite our efforts to create a sense of safety, the memory of that night lingered, a permanent scar on my college experience. The dormitory, with its rows of rooms and long, gloomy corridors, would forever be a place of both fond memories and dark, terrifying encounters. And the faceless girl, with her cold, damp grip, would remain an indelible part of my story, a ghostly figure that blurred the line between reality and the supernatural. Years ago, the building that now stands as a dormitory was once a quaint apartment, home to a loving couple. Their lives were tragically shattered one night when two men broke in, seeking valuables. The robbery turned violent, and the man was brutally murdered. The woman, though spared, was left psychologically scarred by the horrific incident. In the aftermath, the owner decided to convert the apartment into a dormitory, hoping to leave the grisly past behind. When I moved into the dorm, I heard whispers about the murder that had taken place there, but I dismissed them, not believing in ghosts. Life in the dormitory was uneventful until one night, as I was staying up late for an exam. I heard a man's moaning echoing through the corridor. Fear gripped me, thinking someone might have broken into our dorm. I quickly locked my door, my phone ready to dial the police. For an hour, the unsettling noise continued before finally fading away. I stayed frozen, not daring to open the door to check if the coast was clear. The next morning, I shared my frightening experience with the landlord. She looked at me with a grave expression and explained that it was likely the ghost of the man who had been murdered there. Many students before me had reported similar experiences. The thought sent chills down my spine, but I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just a coincidence. However, the following evening, the ghostly moaning returned, even louder and more insistent than before. Terror kept me awake all night, every creak and whisper amplifying my fear. I felt trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the haunting presence. The next day, I went to the landlord again, my nerves frayed. I told her I couldn't stand the constant fear and sleepless nights any longer. With a heavy heart, I decided to move to a new dorm, hoping to leave the haunted memories behind. The dormitory, with its tragic past, remained a place of horror that I would never forget.